how many salespeople do you need to take your company from roughly $2 million to $140 million plus and potentially public? Well, I'm not going to make you watch the whole video to tell you that number. It's 149. Now, if you'd like to work with me, links in the bio. If you'd like to get a sheet of this for yourself so that you can run this with your own number, the link for that is also in the bio. I'll email it over to you. But let me kind of back up. I'll walk you through how I got to these numbers and kind of like the entire point of this exercise, right? So if you've raised venture capital, if you're in the SaaS world, you have probably heard of T2D3, and that stands for triple, triple, double, double, double. And what this is kind of the expected and ideal growth path for a company that is raising venture capital. It's also a pretty high growth rate, right? So the idea is that kind of like year zero on this plan, this is not necessarily your company at year zero, but year zero, you're at about $2 million. Now in that first year, you triple, so you go to 6 million. In the second year, you triple again, you're at 18 million. Year 3, double to 36. Year 4, double to 72. Year 5, double to 144. Voila, you are now like eligible to IPO. Even in a bad market, you're going to be worth $1 billion. In a good market, probably a lot more. And I was thinking about this, and I kind of wanted to know, how many salespeople do you need to hire just to run this plan, right? Just to think about this from a like recruiting planning, from a recruiting cycle point of view. So I've built this interactive calculator that you can plug in your own numbers and work out how many you would need. And I've also put in some numbers, some assumptions. I'll walk you through that and kind of what that looks like. So how the spreadsheet works. If it's in blue, it's an input number. If it's in black, it's a calculation. So replace the blue numbers with your own company numbers. The formula for revenue per rep is number of leads times win rate times average deal size. A major limitation to this spreadsheet is that new reps are counted as fully ramped on day one when they show up in the sheet. Realistically, they need to start 3 to 6 months earlier. Now, if you're going to make your own copy file, make a copy. Now, we're starting this at year zero. So this is where you're starting from. The other major limitation to this is this spreadsheet only covers account executives. It doesn't include SDRs, SEs, managers, and so on, right? So just some of the assumptions out of the way. Let's walk through what this looks like and kind of like just some of the raw numbers, right? We've said you need to hire 149 account executives to go from 2 mil to 144 mil. Let's kind of work out how this actually like eventuates in the real world. So number of leads per rep. Now I've segmented this out into 3 segments: SMB, mid-market, enterprise. In this first year, I am going on the assumption that this is all founder-led sales, and we're just going to go with a single segment. So we're getting 180 leads across the business. We're winning 20% of them, and our average deal size, we actually don't need to worry about this 15K. We don't need to worry about the 75K. We're going with our average deal size is 25K. So if we brought in a rep and they hit their quota, they would hit $900,000 in revenue. We also need to look at net revenue retention, or NRR, right? The entire point of software as a service is that your customers come back, they spend more with you the year after. And we're going to assume that for every dollar that they spent with you last year, spending $1.20. Obviously, that's not going to be across every customer, but some customers you're going to have some upsells. Some customers you're going to have like really large lands and then expands. So in our existing recurring revenue for the hypothetical company, we're at $1 million in revenue. $400,000 of that I've said is coming from SMB. The other $600,000 is from mid-market, and we're not selling any enterprise deals. So we've got $1 million in revenue at the end of the year. Over the course of that year, we are now at 420K in recurring revenue. In the mid-market, we are at 720K. We've got $1.14 million. And this is like the real, especially as you kind of look further, this is the real powerhouse. This is actually like doing so much of the work for us as we grow the business. We get to like the final year, 144 million, 55% of it, right? Roughly is coming from this recurring revenue. So yes, we are building a big machine to acquire huge amounts of business, but our recurring revenue, that's really keeping the lights on. That is more or less doing like half the work for us. So let's start with our new revenue engine. Well, as I said, founder-led sales, right? And we're going to start with like headcount. Now, a big thing here. I have assumed that we're going to have 50% churn within the existing team. And this is anyone who has lasted more than a year. Now, this might seem high. It's based on the numbers that I have seen. I think it's about right. I also want to just call out, if you promote someone into management, they have churned for the purposes of this exercise, right? Because they are no longer a direct seller. If you move them into a different department, they have churned, although not from your company, they have churned from this team. And we're thinking about this in the context of how many recruiting cycles do you need to pull off? How many people do you actually need to hire? Now, for these numbers, I don't think it's useful to have like 1.2 salespeople or 1.6 salespeople or 5.4, right? I've rounded them down just using the round function. Usually that rounds things down, but occasionally, like if we look here in the second year, it rounds things, up. So first year, we have this existing team, no existing team because it's just the founders. In this first year, we've said we want to hire 2 mid-market account executives. That is my general rule of thumb. Now, the assumption is that for every, like 10 hires you make, 3 are going to be mishires. So they're fired, they've left, they've quit for whatever reason. They do not make it to their first year anniversary, right? So for 2, well, unfortunately, we can't have 1.4 salespeople, right? So we've got 1. And we've assumed that this person does $900,000 in net new revenue because we've got 180 leads, we're winning 20% of them, and we're sitting at that deal size. So we need to hire 2 to get there. And if we look, we get into like year 1 for the purposes of the T2D3. Okay, we've now split this out. So we've got some SMB leads. Again, like I've just taken this number where it was kind of like aggregated. We're saying that SMB leads, they get about 15 leads per month. Mid-market, slightly less than that, call it 13 or so. And then enterprise, about 5 per month, right? And we're saying you win 20%. I have moved all of these numbers up, right? So, well, in the mid-market and enterprise sense, the whole point of this being variable or kind of like these all being input numbers is the assumption that this will change over the years, right? Like your average deal size, it's probably going to go up over the years as your product team build out more features, as you get more of a brand name within the market. So if we go into year 2, again, like these are some, I would say, like fairly standard expectations for your reps. I think this one might be a little bit out of whack just in terms of kind of what we expect from mid-market reps. But again, it's all spreadsheet math, and you need to create this for yourself. The other assumption here is that our net revenue retention goes up a little bit, right? So over time, you convert more and more. You see public companies with these kind of net revenue retention numbers. So I think the key point here is we are in year 1 and we have got $2 million in existing recurring revenue. Now, where do we get it from? Well, we took the end of year recurring revenue from last year, and then we added any new revenue from the SMB segment. And so we've got that $420,000. Now, last year we had $600,000 in mid-market recurring revenue. It was $720 by the end of the year. And then we have added another $900,000 for it, right? So that gets us to $2 million in recurring revenue. Now, that goes up a little bit because we've got our CS team, our account management team kind of growing that number. And we've also got our rep from last year. In this case, we are going to assume that they don't churn and that they bring in $960,000. So year 2, we bring in 2 SMB reps, we bring in 2 mid-market reps, we bring in 3 enterprise reps, and the assumption is we end the year with 4 reps overall. And that new team, they bring in $3 million. I think you can see where this is going. You kind of need to play around with these numbers for yourself and just kind of work this out. But I found this a really interesting exercise. How many people do you actually need to hire? Because even if someone shows up on their first day and then they quit, they've still cost you a recruiting cycle. And that, I think, is just something that a lot of founders really, really underprice just in terms of thinking about how they allocate their effort, how they allocate their time. Now, if you'd like to work with a recruiter who understands SaaS sales, there's a link to speak with me. Otherwise, give this a like, give this a subscribe. I'm going to keep posting a whole lot of content like this. Talk soon.